But guys, thanks so much for being here. It's a privilege to hang out with our family tonight. I'm going to pray, and Pastor Leila is going to come and share with us. Jesus, thank you so much. God, you are so good. God, thank you first for your pursuit of us. God, that you love us so much, that you pursued us even when we ran away from you. God, your love is so amazing. Lord, we pray tonight that we'll just know you even more and know your love and your compassion. And God, do something in our lives. We pray that when we walk out of here tonight, that we will know you more, that we will be like you more, that we will, God, just pursue you. We thank you, Jesus, for everything you've done. God, bless us. Bless our time tonight. Amen.
I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I've failed over and over and over again in my life. And that is why I succeed.
There's a basketball game tomorrow night, right? No, wait, that's football, sorry. We're like, that's why we moved the leadership meeting back. Somebody was like, ah! So, yeah, not basketball, but that's about the extent of my knowledge, except I have heard of Michael Jordan. Okay, so if I've heard of him, then he is famous, I'm thinking. So I'm Leila, Pastor Leila, glad to have you guys here tonight. And I want to talk to you a little bit about failure and success and daring greatly and how those things are all tied together. Because Michael Jordan just told us here, missed more than 9,000 shots in his career, lost almost 300 games, 26 times, was trusted with that shot at the end and missed. So that one seems like it might be the most brutal because other people could have taken the shot and might have gotten it right, and he let everybody down because he failed at that. Now, most people, though, here, you would probably not think Michael Jordan. Now, there's a failure. Anybody here ever think the man is a failure? And he's just told us all the different ways that he's failed, and probably many, many, many more. But nobody sees Michael Jordan as a failure. Why is that? Because he's made a lot of shots too, right? He's won a lot of games. He won a lot of them in the last couple seconds for his team. That kind of like, let's pass it to Michael because he'll know what to do. And he does. He comes through, right? So even though he's failed, somehow there is some sort of correlation. Do you hear that last line? I failed over and over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed. So that's what we're talking about tonight. I know last week I said next week we're talking about failure, and everybody was like, yay! Like, we're talking about such random, weird stuff. But we talked about reflecting on 2015 and really living a life of intentionality as we move forward, not losing a single opportunity, not a single one, not a single thought, not a single action, not a single person who comes around in our lives, right? Did a little bit of reflection. Then last week we talked about dreaming, what it means to dream. And I looked at Joseph because he's probably one of the Bible's best dreamers. And what all that meant for him, how long that took, and all the pain and crushing that was involved in the accomplishment of his dream, but that God did it. And so I would really love for us, and I'm kind of hammering this quite a bit in this month, just to make sure we understand that God does want us to dream. He does. He doesn't want us to just kind of continue with what we've always known, what we've always seen, what we've always been. He wants this year to be different. He wants our lives to be different. And so as we kind of lead into what that looks like tonight, we're talking about daring greatly. Now, what if we fail? Because, I mean, think about it. If Michael Jordan is saying there's some sort of correlation between failure and success, because he has failed so many times, he has succeeded. So what is the worst thing that can happen? Is the worst thing that can happen in our lives failing? I mean, I think most of us would probably say no, never trying, or something inspirational, right? That's on a quote or on a mug or on a calendar, the first month of the year, I'm sure it's on there. The worst thing to ever do is never try, whatever. We say it and we think it and we hear it and we love it and we applaud it, but that doesn't always translate into doing it and taking the steps that need to be taken to do that. So what we're going to look at tonight, there's this amazing quote by Theodore Roosevelt that I go back to all the time. And it says this: it is not the critic who counts, and this is gender neutral. Just pretend it's gender neutral, because I always stick a W-O in front of all these mans here. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man or woman who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there's no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends him or herself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly. The best thing that can happen if we dare greatly is the triumph of high achievement, and then different spheres and different goals and different dreams. That looks different. You know, for Joseph, it looked like saving millions of people's lives, entire nations that would have starved without not only his interpreting the dreams, but he had to be in the right place at the right time, being faithful in those years of crushing, obscurity, hiddenness, misjudgment, all of that stuff. He had to be still there, still listening to God, still close to God, and because of that, the dream was fulfilled, right? But even if he fails, even if she fails, here's the thing: at least we fail while daring greatly. And honestly, this could be a quote of my life, because honestly, sometimes I feel like, oh man, how many things have we failed at? How many things have we tried that haven't worked? Countless, probably, at this point. But at least we failed while trying something, right? To me, that's worth my life. Anything short of that, I just could do something else, right? Like, we could just do something else. If this what we're doing is not about the world changing, about kingdom transformation, then we could be, I don't know, is there a football game tonight? I don't know. Maybe not. No? It's done. Okay, sorry. He knows. He knows the score. He was watching it after prayer, not during prayer. He was there. But many Sunday nights, we could be watching, you know what I'm saying? Like, we could be doing something else. We've all got people we could hang out with and things we could do. We don't need to be here doing this if there's not going to be something powerful that comes from our lives. That's what God wants. So anyone who's ever accomplished great things has had to dare greatly, like big time. And how were they able to risk everything? That's the question. How do we get to the point where we're able to say, I will step out, whether I am naturally a pioneer or a developer, right? We're all different. We've talked about this many times. We work through this in our huddles in different spaces, that some people change and risk and all that stuff is natural. Some people are just entrepreneurial like that. They just want to do it. And some people are like, you go hack your way with a machete through the jungle and let me know what's there, and I will come and build you a building and start banks and post offices and make sure your children have education. Those are developers. So we all have a place in the body. There's no better personality or not. But God always seems to find new ways to call us to these kind of outside of ourselves risky things, regardless of what our personality is. It really is the nature of what we would call apostolic, risking, stepping outside, being sent, allowing ourselves to be sent, and saying, I'm here. I don't know what I'm going to do when you get me there. I have no idea what I'm doing. I have no competencies for this whatsoever, but if you want me, I'm available. And it's crazy when we do that. He picks up a little 17-year-old boy like Joseph and plops him in the middle of Egypt, where 13 years later he's going to fulfill this dream, right? He takes a shepherd boy, another teenage boy, out in the middle of nowhere watching sheep, and over the course of years makes him into the king, the greatest king of Israel, David, that anybody still today, they say he's the greatest king that Israel ever had. He had no training, no competencies. I mean, it boggles my mind when I think about how fresh he was for that job. And it didn't seem to, God just said, hey, you are someone I can trust to serve me and love me no matter where I put you. And what's more, you would be content in the field or you'd be content as king. So I don't really think God could find that many people at the time that he could do that with. And so that's the goal, is to, however we're wired, whatever's going to come naturally to us, to allow God to have permission to say, I would like you, and I would like you over there. Or I would like you to shake it up and do this different thing. I would like you to dream about what life could look like if you took a risk here. Now let's look at someone who knew how to take risks. When I think of someone who jumped in every chance he got, whether he failed or not, I think of Peter, okay, the disciple Peter. From the very start, Peter has this ability. It doesn't always work out in his favor, okay, but to just dive in all the way, just to say, I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, I almost see him as this guy who's like sitting, when Jesus comes and calls him, he's sitting in the boat, and it says he left his nets and followed him right away. I almost see him like jump in the water and just wade to shore, like, wait, don't leave me. Like, this is a chance of a lifetime. I'm going. So we're just going to look at one little instance in Peter's life, probably one of the ones that he's best known for, and that is in Matthew chapter 14. Now, the heading in my Bible says Jesus walks on water, but I changed it to Jesus and Peter, because Peter does walk on water in this instance, which is crazy if you think about it, right? So let's read the story. Jesus insisted that his disciples get back into the boat and cross to the other side of the lake. This is right after he feeds the 5,000, I believe, while he sent the people home. After sending them home, he went up into the hills by himself to pray. Night fell while he was there alone. Meanwhile, the disciples were in trouble far away from land, for a strong wind had risen, and they were fighting heavy waves. About 3 o'clock in the morning, Jesus came toward them, walking on the water. When the disciples saw him walking on the water, they were terrified. In their fear, they cried out, "It's a ghost!" But Jesus spoke to them at once. "Don't be afraid," he said. "Take courage, I'm here." Then Peter called to him, "Lord, if it's really you, tell me to come to you walking on the water." "Yes, come," Jesus said. Now, hold on a second. Stop right there. Okay, the problem had been solved, if you notice. They were scared. Jesus is coming. He's got to get to the boat. He was left ashore to do some things. They went out and started. They're all scared. He comes along walking on the water. They're freaked out, and he says, "It's me." Done, right? Chapter ended, story over, except Peter decides, let's extend it a little, and let's just see what's going to happen here. There's my rabbi walking on the water. And in the way they thought about following rabbis, and the way they would have thought when they said, "Yes, I will follow you," is, if he can do it, I can do it. It was just in the mindset of people in that day. If someone calls me to follow them, that person believes that I can be just like them. I can do the things that they do. I can go the places they go. I can act in such a way. And so, okay. Now, this was a little bit of a stretch, right? I doubt there was any other disciples of any other rabbis trying to do this sort of thing. But it was kind of in some way, it must have been back in Peter's mind to try something if Jesus was doing it, if he was following Jesus. And so he says, "If it's you, call me to come out to you." And Jesus, and it's also kind of a little test of Jesus. Will he believe in me enough to say, try it? Because at this point, it's Peter. Now, Jesus has already shown his skills, you know what I'm saying? There's nothing left for him to do. He is powerful. He's walking on water. Good. Rabbi is awesome, right? Everybody is sitting back thinking that's amazing. Now it's Peter's turn, and Peter turns to his rabbi and says, "If you think I can do this, tell me, and I will jump out of this boat right now and try it." And Jesus says, "Come on, see what happens." So Peter went over the side of the boat and walked on the water toward Jesus. See? He walks. It's amazing. It's miraculous. But when he saw the strong wind and the waves, he was terrified and began to sink. "Save me, Lord," he shouted. And of course, Jesus immediately reached out and grabbed him. "You have so little faith," Jesus said. "Why did you doubt me?" You catch that? Not why did you doubt yourself? Why did you doubt me? Now I don't think Peter doubted that Jesus could do it because there was proof right there on the water. I think what Jesus was trying to say is, when you doubt yourself, when I've called you to something, when I say, "Come on out onto the water," and then you look around and say, "Whoa, hold on a second. This is actually impossible, what I'm doing right now. This should not be happening." In spite of the fact that I've been doing it, now, I don't know how long Peter had been walking. It doesn't say. I don't know if he'd been walking on water for a split second or like 20 minutes. I don't know. But for some length of time, he was doing it, and then he said, "Whoa, hold on a second." And Jesus says, when you doubt that when I call you to do something, when you doubt yourself, you're doubting me. Really, no matter what we try to say about ourselves and how we can't do things that God calls us to do, and we try to make it sound like it's really us doubting ourselves. Like, I would never doubt God. He's, of course, big, and he doesn't let us off the hook with that, you know? He says, no, if I've called you to do something and you say it's not possible, you are doubting me, actually. So this story about Peter shows us some things about how to dare greatly. So let's look at a couple things. The first one is this. We have to take a step of faith. This is a leap of faith. It says Peter went over the side of the boat. It doesn't even, I don't even get a picture there's a ladder. I think he just went over the side and just let's see what's going to happen. If this guy's powerful enough to have me walk, it doesn't matter how messy it is. It doesn't matter how ugly it is. Peter did everything like half ugly. You know what I'm saying? Like none of it was graceful. I love Peter. I love Peter for this reason. Peter is like, okay, no matter how much trouble I get myself into or how much I put my foot in my mouth or how, whatever. Peter is always worse. So I can always look at Peter and say, man, you messed up so many times. Look at you at the end of your discipleship. He was unbelievable. But that's because every time he took a leap of faith, can you imagine what he was thinking? Sometimes we read these stories and we're like, great man of faith. Peter wasn't really that at all at this stage. But he had already practiced this idea of risking everything. And in Matthew 4, this is where we see Jesus calling him. It says, one day as Jesus was walking along the shore of the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon, also called Peter, and Andrew, throwing a net into the water, for they fished for a living. Jesus called out to them, come, follow me, and I will show you how to fish for people. And they left their nets at once and followed him. At once. Now, this is not just like a job, This is not just like a job that these guys were doing that they could take or leave. This was their not only their livelihood, it was their entire family, what we call oikos. The whole idea of extended family, when in that day you didn't worry about what you were going to do when you grew up. So this is the unbelievable anxious tension that we have in the month of March when we have 100 college students. And Lauren is here. She was here last year in March with MSU. And it is unbelievable because, we sit around and we have the girl times and the guy times. And everybody wants to know how Eric and I got together. And we're talking about all these things. And we're like, And they're like, where's the Bible say about how to choose our spouse? We're like, the Bible doesn't say. You know why? They didn't get to choose their spouse. Okay? Where does the Bible say about my major? There's no major. You do what your dad did. And then you do what your mama did. And there is no choice. There is no freedom. How do I know whether I'm supposed to stay at home or I'm supposed to move across the world? There's no story about how to choose that because they didn't get to do that. They all stuck around home. Like the Eastern world took away a lot of freedoms that we have today and probably a whole lot of stinking stress, if you hear me, to say, I already know. So Peter and Andrew were doing what their father did and what his father had done. They weren't stressing out about what their vocation should be. They're doing, because they had been left behind by all the other rabbis, understand? The way this worked when people called disciples was the very, very, very best, kind of put in an application sort of, and eventually they got received. Well, obviously, if Peter and Andrew were fishing, they were not part of the cut. In fact, none of the disciples were, except a couple that were disciples of other people. Those were really the only couple people that were really smart enough or spiritual enough, okay? Because it really did have to do with character and all that stuff too. Here they come along. Jesus comes along. They're sitting in their boat fishing. It is not only their livelihood, but it is everything about their family, where they've come from. Imagine. And we don't have a sense of that as much because we're much more mobile and, we can choose to do whatever we want. And, you can... Abby just got a job at Keystone, so she'll do that for a year, and halfway through she might skip out and do something else. Like, this is how Summit County works, right? But this is not how this worked back then. They left their nets at once and followed him. I love this phrase at once because Mark uses words like that a lot. At once, immediately, right away. Mark is all about action, the way Mark writes his gospel. He's writing to Romans, and a lot of people believe specifically Roman soldiers when he writes his gospel, and so he is all about action. There's a lot of demonic, deliverance. There's a lot of miracles. Mark is just, he doesn't bother with the words. There's not very much red ink, in Mark, as opposed to Matthew, where Matthew is writing to Jews, and he wants to make sure they understand. Jesus is the fulfillment of all these things. The Romans couldn't care less. What do you mean, Old Testament? We don't know the Old Testament, right? So Matthew rarely uses this term. When he does use it, it stands out to me. At once, they stopped and followed him. So see, Peter had already had practice in this whole daring greatly thing by saying, I've never met this man, from what we know. I don't really know where he's going. I don't even know what he's talking about when he's talking about fishing for people. What is he talking about? This is not language. Jesus' language was not language, by and large, that they were familiar with. unless he was using terms about rabbis and disciples. They really didn't know much about what he was about. All I know is they were sitting there thinking, here's someone who believes in me, and he's actually calling us, which is not the way it usually worked. I will leave everything behind and follow him. That was pretty risky, I think. The only thing they know that Jesus is going to do with them is teach them how to do what he knows how to do. And it's worth their life. He doesn't tell them where they're going to get money. He doesn't tell them how they're going to live. He doesn't tell them where they're going to stay. He doesn't tell them how long he's going to be around. And I guarantee you, if he had said, I'll be here for 3 years, and then you have to figure something out, they would have probably not followed. But this was dramatic enough and crazy enough and risky enough that Peter was all about it. Now, every single person that Jesus called, they were all different. We see this spectrum of different kind of personalities. A lot of the disciples we don't know very much about at all. But even in church history, we can pick out some of these things. Not everybody was a crazy pioneer sticking their foot in their mouth every other minute like Peter. But they all left what they had and followed him. And sometimes it's just that simple. Hebrews 11:1 says, faith is the confidence that what we hope for will actually happen. It gives us assurance about things we cannot see. Faith is confidence that the things we're hoping for are actually going to happen. That is so simple. I love the way the writer of Hebrews puts that. And it gives us assurance about things we can't see. So here's what I can tell about faith. If I can see it, even in my mind, I'm probably not having to operate in faith. Now, that doesn't mean it's bad. I mean, sometimes God lays things out for us very clearly. He lays a plan out before us, all of that. There's nothing wrong with that. He works that way often. But I'm not doing that. Because faith is a thing that gives me assurance about things I can't see. Richard Kiyosaki, he's a really rich guy. Eric likes him. He's a rich dad, not a poor dad, if you've ever heard any of that stuff. He's taken a lot of risks to get where he is. And he said, if you're the kind of person who is waiting for the right thing to happen, you might wait for a long time. It's like waiting for all the traffic lights to be green for 5 miles before starting the trip. Does that make sense? All the traffic lights have to be green for 5 miles because what if I run against a red light? We'll never do anything. We will never step out in faith. We will never dare greatly. We will never accomplish much if we can't take some sort of leap of faith. I don't know if that means for you this year something in your career or something for God. Most certainly it's something for God, but that's in lots of different categories. If that's intellectual capital or financial capital or spiritual capital or any of the capitals that we've been talking about the whole time, relational capital to forgive or to trust. I don't know. All of our risky things are different, right? Something that's easy for me would be hard for someone else and vice versa. So I don't know where God might be leading you, but I would say maybe ask God if there's some area where we're waiting for everything to come together before we obey. Is there some area where I feel like the Lord has spoken to me, but I'm still saying, well, if I could just have these last 5 things lined up, because really, he can do that for us. He might not. He could. But then we don't get the chance to take a leap of faith. So the second lesson that we learn about daring greatly from Peter is that we have to push through when things get hard. And they will get hard. If it's truly a dream that is unattainable without God, at some point something is going to get hard. I really wish they would preach this in Bible college. I don't know why. They don't tell you these things. It's going to be hard. It's actually not going to be easy. Actually, everything is not going to come together when you snap your fingers, partly because, most of us are punk 17-year-old boys like Joseph who really needed 13 years of crushing, I guess. But every place that we go, this is the type of thing that our American culture wants to just kind of like bury under the ground, that everything's going to be easy if you're actually a success. I've never seen anybody who didn't have to deal with something hard to get to someplace great. Think about Peter. Now, we always think about his failure. He decides to step out. So he does take a leap of faith, right? Jumps out of the boat. And he walks on water. So he is actually, for some time or another, actually doing this crazy impossible thing, and then he gets distracted, and he starts to sink. So at some point, what is working is no longer working in his brain. It's all about what he believes and what he doesn't believe, really, at that point. God has got him. Whatever was happening physically with that water or under the surface or whatever, God had it handled. It was him who stopped believing and started doubting. Probably he thought himself, but really it was God, Jesus says. So what changed? Just because he got out on the water doesn't mean he stayed there. Okay? This is the point. things are going to get hard at some point if we're going to accomplish something. What are we going to do when they do? It takes a whole lot of practice to get this daring greatly thing down. It takes a whole lot of times of saying, "Ooh, if I had just followed through for another week, if I had just held on to that idea for another month, if I had just told 16 more people about that dream, if I just, whatever." I mean, really, I think anybody who is great at this has failed many times when it comes to pushing through, following through. Peter certainly did, because he figured it out. And if you read the book of Acts, especially the first half of it, you're going to read a lot of stuff where Peter did this really well. This daring greatly thing. Things started to get hard, and instead of backing out, instead of denying his rabbi 3 times, Peter is, church history tells us, crucified upside down for his faith, because he could not handle dying the same way Jesus had. He said, "I'm not worthy to die the same way my Savior did." So that's not in the Bible, but that's what church history tells us. That's the kind of man he became, partially through these types of things, where he stopped and thought. I bet you he had a lot of quiet moments to think about his time out on the water and why that didn't really work out for him. This is what I love the version of this in the Message. Matthew 5 is the Beatitudes, so it looks a little different in this version. But you're blessed when you're at the end of your rope. With less of you, there's more of God in his rule. This is part of the reason things don't work out the way we want them to all the time. Part of the reason things aren't as easy as we think they're supposed to be. Because with less of us, there's more of God and his rule. There's more of the kingdom coming through us. Because if it were so easy that any punk could pull off this thing, be a whole lot of punks running around, right? There are already enough. There's already enough. I mean, my goodness, God has been so good to us to not let things work out in the timing and in the way and with the success and with the applause. I look at some of my friends who things have worked out for very much more quickly, and my heart goes out to them, because I don't know where we would be in our own character and our own walk with the Lord without stuff not working the way it's supposed to work. You know what I'm saying? Life going crazy. There's more of God in his rule. And that's the deal with our dreams. 13 years it took for Joseph. What if he gave up? What if he got bitter? What if he just decided, you know what, God ditched me, and I'm super irritated about it, so I'm just going to sit around and whine in this jail cell, and somebody will hear. No, he just consistently just keeps going. Whatever. We'll see how it works out. And look what God did. 13 years it took him to get everything in place, and one day it took him to fulfill the dream. It's crazy. He can do things so fast and so powerfully, far beyond what we can imagine, when we're ready, when things are ready for that. Thomas Edison said this: "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." 10,000 ways. Think about that. Now, of course, he's using hyperbole, but for real, Thomas Edison was sort of known for like over and over and over again. And when he would find some way, of course, he invented the light bulb, the things that he did, amazing brain. When he did something that didn't work, instead of saying, "Oh, wow, put all my eggs in that basket, I must be a complete failure," he was like, "Well, that doesn't work. Let's move on to the next option," right? I've actually learned something because I figured out that way is not the way to do it. Talk about motivation. That's the way I want to live. That's the way I want to do things. Okay, just found another way that won't work. I have shared this with some of you guys, but one of the pictures that God gave me last year for myself to grow is I saw this little, like an old school video game. And some of you guys don't remember old school video games because you're really young, but the ones where there's like a blob. It wasn't like HD. You could see the guy's eyeballs, and see like his cheek. Anyway, it was like this little blob, like running into stuff and going around corners, and kind of this picture of this little character in a video game just bouncing off this wall, just trying to get through this wall again and again. And 4 feet over, there's an open door. And just trying to encourage me, Lila, just look for another way. So just keep banging your head against the wall if you want, and being upset all the time that this is not working. Or maybe there's another way. It just requires a little bit of creativity and grace for yourself. Winston Churchill said this: "Success is not final. Failure is not fatal." I love that one. It's the courage to continue that counts. Success isn't final, Look around at the world. And failure is not fatal. It's not going to kill us to fail. It's the courage to continue that counts. These are great people that I'm quoting here who've done pretty massive things. And if they're saying that, it might be a good thing to listen to. So ask God tonight if there's some area where we've started We got a dream, things started working out, and then all of a sudden it got hard. So we've backed away. Because that might be an area he wants us to push into this year. And then last thing that we learned about Daring Greatly is that we must embrace failure. There it is. There she is. We have got to embrace failure. I have a mentor of more than a decade, who's always said this. Failure can be one of our greatest teachers if we ever let her speak. We are so scared of failure. Our culture has taught us, this is an American culture. I could go on and on about church ministry culture too, but it all fits under the same thing. Failure is bad, failure is wrong, failure means you're a failure. If you fail at something, you're a failure, and nobody wants to be a failure. And so let's make things, even if I have to work it into some way that's totally against what I believe and sell out in every conceivable way, as long as it looks like it's succeeding, I have value in other people's eyes. So let's do that thing. Whereas failure is actually really powerful. It can actually be a really good teacher. But we have to embrace her. We can't be scared. Every person who has ever dared greatly has failed. Most of the time, people remember from this story about Peter that he failed. That he walked on the water and then he started sinking. But let me just ask you, what were the other 11 disciples doing? Nice and comfy, nice and warm, dry. I mean, he was probably super wet and uncomfortable. I don't know. They're just sitting there like, look at Peter. There he goes off the edge of the boat. Let's see what kind of crazy thing he gets into now. I don't remember ever, there's no single translation that says Jesus and some other disciple walks on the water. This whole story is about Jesus and Peter. Now, it didn't have to be. Because the other 11 disciples had the same rabbi walking on the water, had the same opportunity to get out of the boat. Even after Peter got out, somebody, even if they weren't the first one to come up with the idea, right? Like, originality is like a god in our culture. If I didn't come up with the idea, I'm sure not following anybody else. They would have been better off to follow him out on the water to experience it themselves. Maybe one of them would have lasted. I don't know. No, they just sit around on the sidelines, probably like, didn't believe. There he goes. It's a good thing Jesus was there to catch him. I got to tell you, that quote in the beginning from Theodore Roosevelt, not to the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where somebody could have said, you could be doing that better. I mean, what in the world are we doing listening to people who are sitting around, criticizing? Do you know what I'm saying? They're still sitting in the boat. Get out of the boat and then lecture me about faith. Failure and this unbelievable fear of it possibly ever happening to us because it's going to crush us into itty bitty bits is why everybody sits in the boat. Just try it. And what happens if you fail? What if you fail? Let's wrap our heads around it. What is the worst thing that can happen? Somebody else looks at us and says, could have told you. So what? Who cares? Who cares what they think? Who cares what people think? We disappoint ourselves because we thought we should have been perfect enough to not fail. Well, I hope after tonight you can wrap your head around the fact that nobody is perfect like that except Jesus. And none of us are going to be him. Nobody is going to get it on the first try. Either they're going to fail or they're going to just sit in the boat. Those are the options. Because without failing somewhat, we never, ever, ever achieve success. What would have happened if Michael Jordan had said, I missed that goal. Oh, man, I missed that shot. Look at my team. I'm never doing this again. Hang it up. I quit. I made a lot of money. I'll go sit somewhere and do something else. Sit on the sidelines and tell other people how to do it. He just kept playing and playing and playing and sometimes making them and sometimes not. And I'm sure people criticized him a lot because that's fun, right? That takes no risk whatsoever. I don't have to make myself vulnerable to criticize someone else. I don't have to try anything ever with my life to criticize anything else, somebody else. I don't have to do anything. All I have to do is figure out something that somebody did wrong, which is kind of fun in our flesh. And he put himself out there in this vulnerable state again and again and again and again. And that's what we do when we risk. I would encourage you, from this quote, Brene Brown wrote this unbelievable book called Daring Greatly that is all about vulnerability And this is her whole point. When we dare greatly, we put ourselves in this vulnerable state where anybody can look around and say, let's see what happens there. Like Joseph's brothers, let's see what happens to his dreams now. I'll tear him to bits. It was God's dream, so it worked out, right? If it's our dream, usually not so much. But somehow, we put ourselves out there, and we were just talking about this week in our conversation about ways that people are being stretched. It is really uncomfortable to put something of yourself out there, right? Whether it's like joining into a conversation, or it's singing a song, or it's writing a spoken word that you share, or it's preaching a sermon, or it's teaching a class, whatever it is, it actually requires a good deal of vulnerability because somebody will find something that could have been better. And if we're not willing to do that, we will never do anything. We'll never try anything. We'll never succeed. We will never dare greatly if we're not willing to put ourselves in a place where we say, my identity could be broken. But, wait a second, my identity is not in what I do. It's in the covenant that I have with Jesus, and so that's never going to change. So, I could actually fail at this 1,000 times, 10,000 different ways to figure out the way something doesn't work, and it would still have no impact whatsoever on who I am to him. Richard Kiyosaki, he said this too. Sometimes you win, sometimes you learn. I like that. When we don't win, we learn something, right? I listened to a TED Talk this week, actually several, about failure. I just get on these things. There's so much good stuff. I love this stuff. I love this stuff. Just fail. Just fail a bunch. Who's failing right now? Cool. Let's do more of that, because at least we're trying. He says this, Eduardo Zanata, the guy who wrote this, did this TED Talk. He says, so there's no such thing as failure. If you've learned a lesson and gave your best, you actually succeeded. So the faster I fail, the faster I learn. The faster I learn, the faster I succeed. So fail as fast as you can. When we're failing, we're learning. And when we're learning, we're actually getting closer to accomplishing what we want. And so let's go fail a bunch. Now, obviously, it'd be better. Sometimes it actually works, amazingly. One time I had 300. It actually works, and then that's wonderful. And God gets the glory for it, and everybody's happy. But the times that it doesn't work, we can walk away. If it doesn't impact what we feel about ourselves, if it doesn't impact our identity and our security, we can walk away and say, ooh, that was a massive failure. And I kind of think Peter must have been really good at that because he failed so often. But he's the only one in any of the stories who ever tried. Babe Ruth, another story, right? He had 714 home runs and 1,330 strikeouts. So what if after any one of those strikeouts he decided not to get back up and try? Like, people are actually booing me now. I have lost for my team. Everybody thinks I'm horrible. I'm just not going to do it again. He got back up, hit another home run the next time, right? Let me just tell you about some of these people. This guy, he wasn't able to speak until he was 4 years old, and his teacher said he would never amount to much. Albert Einstein. She was demoted from her job as news anchor because she wasn't fit for television. Oprah Winfrey. Who's fired from a newspaper for lacking imagination and having no original ideas. Walt Disney. Left devastated and depressed after being unceremoniously removed from the company he started. Steve Jobs. That was at age 30. His teacher told him he was too stupid to learn anything and that he should go into a field where he might succeed by virtue of his pleasant personality. That was Thomas Edison. Told by a recording studio that they didn't like their sound and said they had no future in show business. That was the Beatles. His first book was rejected by 27 publishers. Dr. Seuss. And he was defeated in 8 elections. Think about this for a second. 8 elections. Do you know how much money and time and work is put into an election? Can we look around and see right now what people are doing to their families and their lives? 8 times he was defeated. Abraham Lincoln. But probably the most renowned president in our history, right? Other than George Washington, maybe? Abraham Lincoln. What if he had just quit? I mean, think about these people. I bet he probably doubted himself once or twice. I don't know. Maybe after like 13 rejection letters, Dr. Seuss thought, this is crap. Like, nobody wants to read this. Nobody is ever going to like my stuff. I mean, it's like If there's a child in your life and you have no idea what to get them, that's what you know, like he is beyond the best children's author ever. And what if he had just quit? Nobody would have ever known any of those things. These are people who failed, like massively. We don't remember those things, right? Nobody knows those things unless we put them up on a PowerPoint. Nobody knows. If you've never failed, you've never tried anything new. I think, especially for young people, I would love to just say, who's failed at something? Because only the really courageous, honest ones will raise their hand. And to be able to say, then the rest of you, what are you doing? Are you sleeping? Are you sleeping your way through your life? Because if you haven't failed, you have never tried anything that you don't already know how to do. And why do I want to spend my life doing everything I already know how to do? Snoresville, in my opinion. I don't know. That just might be me. Let's try something. Let's fail. Is there an area where you're afraid of failure? Join the club, guys. Nobody loves failure. I mean, let's be real. Even pioneers that are trying stuff, nobody likes to fail. They're just a little bit more comfortable with it. We always want to succeed, and preferably on the first try. Because I would love for people to think that I'm competent and beyond competent, excellent at everything. That Leila was somehow born with the innate knowledge to do everything right and everything well and everything with excellence and just knock people's socks off every time I try anything new. I mean, we would not be sitting here tonight if everything that we were trying to try, we had to know what we were doing and it actually worked. You know how long we've been here? You know, things we've tried, sometimes we just kind of look at each other like, uh-oh, that wasn't good. That was really bad. Fail, epic fail. But what have we learned from this? Let's take it to the next thing we're going to do, because we're sure not quitting. Because we've got 96% of our county doesn't know Christ, and a whole world dying without the blessings and the covenant with God that we take for granted all the time. So, I mean, I guess we get to rest and quit on all that stuff and get to heaven, because until then, he's going to keep asking us to keep daring greatly. So let's ask yourself. I'm going to ask you just to close your eyes and just give the Lord a little space to talk just in these last couple of minutes. Is it possible that we are still hanging on and we are not taking a leap of faith? God has said, do this, try this, act this way, whatever. Everybody else in our lives might be saying, this is foolish. Not because of what the Lord's telling them, but just because of conventional wisdom. And if that's the case, and you know that that's what the Lord is asking, just release that to him tonight. God, I will step out of the boat. I probably won't do it right. I probably won't do it gracefully. I'll probably screw it up a bunch. But I'm not going to keep sitting in the boat. Maybe you have stepped out. And then all of a sudden, it's like, wow, everybody's always told me that if this is really God, it's going to be really easy. And it's not easy. I just want to encourage you, it still could really be God. And maybe just that grip, failure, that fear of failure just has a grip on you. Either because of what other people will think or letting yourself down. Let me tell you something right now. You're not going to let God down. I have never once looked at my children trying to learn how to walk and seen them fall down and thought, what an idiot moron. Get yourself up and do it right. There's so much pleasure that God takes, that our Father takes in watching us try, in watching us stumble, even in watching us fall, in watching us fail when we lean on him. If there's fear, and you know this, and as I'm saying this, you feel like, yep, I don't even know maybe what the dream is, but I know that something is holding me back, and it's this fear that I could fail. Remember, you're in really, really good company if you fail. So where might God be saying, dare greatly? And what are you going to do about it? Just as everyone's eyes are closed, nobody looking around, please. I'm just going to ask before we end, if there's anyone here tonight, you really can't say that you're walking with God. And that whole call that Jesus gave to Peter, you've heard it, but you just haven't been willing to step out because you know that it costs you everything, and actually it's to your credit that you know that, because sometimes people don't take the cost of this seriously. But you know it's going to cost you everything, and so you've said no, but you feel like tonight you want to say yes. I don't know what that means. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know what I'm going to have to give up. I don't know what it's going to end up being in the end, but I will follow Jesus. If there's anyone here tonight, you'd say, this is the time that I need to make that decision. I'm just going to ask you to lift up your face and make eye contact with me so I know who you are. Lord, we want to dream big. We want to dare greatly. We want to come right in line with your huge, massive dreams for this world. And somewhere deep down, I know that you've got crazy things, not just for this county, but through it and around the world, to transform generations, generation after generation, that you are calling us to be courageous, even in the face of fear. Whatever it means to us tonight, Lord, we want to say yes. Yes. We'll follow. Because ultimately we trust you, and none of this is about us. So help us, God. Help us. Step out of the boat and just try. Amen.